In this week's In-Ear Insights, should old acquaintance be forgot? We're going to look back at the year that was 2022 because this will be the last Trust Insights podcast until the new year, and so we'll probably kick off the new year in January with something like New Year's resolutions or planning or something along those lines. But for now, let's sit back with the beverage of your choice. It's 8 in the morning, so it's coffee here, and talk about the year that was. Katie, when you look back at the wild and crazy year that was 2022, what comes to mind? What'd you learn? What things took you by surprise? What stuff are you saying, let us never speak of this again?
It's funny. Whenever I have conversations like this, the way that time moves is so liquid in a way of like, you know, when you look back and say, "Oh, that was still this year. That was this year. That wasn't 10 years ago." And I can, a very specific example of that was in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. I remember the Netflix TV show Tiger King got released. And by the time the end of the year rolled around, we felt like we had all lived through about a decade, and nobody could fathom and wrap their heads around the fact that Tiger King had been released right before the pandemic of that same year. It felt like it had happened so long ago. And so when I think about all the things that happened this year in 2022, I'm struggling to really pinpoint like the big major things. I mean, the one that's notable that we're still experiencing right now as we're recording this podcast is the change in ownership of, one of the world's most popular social media platforms, Twitter. And so that in terms of businesses and marketing and customer support and communication and communities, that change of leadership has had a huge impact. And in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. It's good in the sense that I think that for a lot of us, it has forced us to rethink how we make those connections online. It's forced us to really explore and discover different paths for creating online communities, taking it a little bit more private. Chris, you wrote about this in your private social media community paper, which I think was very timely because we're seeing day after day people who have built homes on Twitter. It's just falling apart brick by brick. And the more bricks that fall into the ocean, the more people are just like, okay, I'm out. I'm going to find a new place. You can find me over on Post. You can find me over on Discord. You can find me on Mastodon. And it feels very disjointed again. There's no central meeting place anymore.
Exactly. The one big one that stands out to me for this year that directly impacts us and our customers was March 17th, 2022, a day that will be noted for the sheer amount of panic it caused when Google announced Universal Analytics is going away as of July 1, 2023. A lot of folks thought we had more time. I thought we had more time. Last time Google made a big change, there was like a 5-year window for people to make a change from the GA.js script to the analytics.js script. And this time, Universal Analytics, GA4 came out in October of 2020. We all just kind of forgot because, global pandemic, and just time went completely off the rails. And so when that announcement came out, a year and a half after GA4 was live, we're all like, wait, didn't it just come out? and so it has been a struggle for many companies to even start talking about that planning, much less get it rolling. It doesn't help that Google is still making substantial changes to the application. As of last week, the entire configure screen moved into the admin panel, which is where it should have been the entire time. Again, one of our complaints early on was like, there's 4 places to configure this thing. And they've just released changes to the underlying data model so that if you build a session in GA4 and then you look at the same data in BigQuery, they're different. They don't match up. So there's still a lot of work to be done there. But I know for 2022, even though that was like, did that happen this year? Like, yes, this year was the year that Universal Analytics was given a tombstone.
And it's funny that you say that because in my head, I'm like, oh no, that was totally last year. And it's one of those things that like, it feels like it's been going on forever. So therefore the fact that we've only been experiencing it for 7 months or so is very hard to wrap your head around. You know,
Exactly.
in terms of our business, you know, we've been fortunate to have another growth year, and we're looking forward to growing even more next year. And I think, you know, with that, it's, you know, there's celebration to be had, but at the same time, at least for me, I feel even more pressure to continue to grow and build in a positive, sustainable way. And so it's really forced me as the CEO to re-examine how I'm doing that with the company, how I'm leading the company, um, how I'm able to grow the company. And it can't be, you know, haphazard, you know, bubble gum and duct tape anymore. Like there has to be some real professionalism and processes and, you know, standards and all of those things. That's not the part that's overwhelming and scary. It's the pressure to get it right.
Mm.
And, you know, knowing that mistakes happen, you know, you can bounce back from them. But, you know, I personally moving into next year, I feel like the stakes are even higher. And so I'm trying to manage my own expectations in terms of what we're capable of, making sure I'm, you know, playing it conservative, but also pushing us a bit more because I know that we're capable of more. And so those are just for the business. I'm hopeful that the the things that I can put in place will help us grow exponentially over the next couple of years.
And speaking of exponential, the one of the biggest changes this year, that is, we're only just starting to see the implications, and it's going to be a little while as the scope is revealed, was generative AI.
Mhm.
Generative AI, with Stable Diffusion's launch in August, which seems like forever ago, but it was actually only just August, which is the open source image generation model that took the world by storm. People doing all sorts of crazy stuff with visual imagery, winning art contests and stuff like that. And then OpenAI's Da Vinci model, which is part of the GPT family. It's the GPT, they call it GPT 3.5 now. And its text generation abilities, the new UI on it, the Chat GPT interface that everyone is talking about, is just a chat interface on this large language model. The language model has gotten so good. It has gotten incredibly good in the last iteration, and GPT-4 is on the way. And we're only now just beginning to see, oh, this thing is actually good and bad. I was helping a friend of mine on one of my Discord servers. They were saying they have to write a paper about Raphael's painting, the School of Athens. And they're like, I don't know what to write. I said, so let's go to OpenAI's Playground, type in, write a 1,500 word essay on the importance of the School of Athens by Raphael, focusing on, this, that, and the other thing. And it spit out a lovely essay. And they're like, wow, this is better than I could have written. I'm like, yeah, it's better. I would have written on it too. You probably should fact check it to make sure it's coherent. But that is the tip of the iceberg for what's going to happen to marketing. I mean, I'm playing with something right now on my personal website. I've never loved the copy on my speaking page. I'm like, because it's one of those things. Like, unless you're a complete narcissist, you don't love writing about yourself, right? Like, hey, hire me. And so I gave it I gave the AI a draft of the outline. Like, here's the cogent facts. Turn this into a landing page copy. And it wrote up something. So what I did was I made a Google optimized test. I said, okay, here's my original. Here's what the machine put out. Let's see which, we'll see which one wins in terms of conversions. And I think this year was the year where this stuff went from being cute or interesting or like a cool party trick to being, oh, this is going to substantially impact any business that deals with writing or imagery, period.
Speaking of things that we thought were going to have a big impact and that were everywhere all the time, 365 NFTs.
Well, yeah.
Everywhere all the time. And so when we started the year, NFT this, NFT that, do you have your NFT? Let's talk about NFTs. Does your business have an NFT? And it was just obnoxious. And now, fast forward, people might still be talking about them, but not with the same, vigor, not with the same passion, not with the same in your faceness. And, I feel like the past couple of years, I mean, it's true of every year. There's always those, flash in the pan trends that people like talk about, and then they die, and then you never hear about them again. Now, I'm not saying that NFTs aren't still a thing, but they're just not taking up the conversation like they were at the beginning of the year. It's the same with, Clubhouse peaked and then was gone. And then you have, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, still things still exist, but just not as overwhelming. And so I would put NFT in that can we move on from that thing category.
And a big part of the reason was the absolute price crash, right? So the crypto market basically collapsed in on itself. For those who are listening only, I'm showing a chart of from CoinMarketCap of just Bitcoin's price, which started the year around $50,000 per coin. And as of today, as we wind down the year, it's hovering around $17,000 a coin. So in this year's time, it has lost like 60% of its value. And because it's a financial system without regulation, which is by design. It's been a lot of the big players, a lot of the well-known brands have kind of shattered into little pieces. A number of folks in the marketing space that we all know had creator coins, right? These essentially sort of digital stocks almost. You could buy a share of Ann Handley's coin or Mark Schaefer's coin or Joe Polizzi's coin and Scott Monty's coin and so on and so forth. And they've all mostly gone away because the underlying company, their coin is essentially worthless now, right? It is worth pennies versus what it used to be. So, it's like many projects in the Web3 economy where because there's no regulation, there's no insurance, there's no protection of any kind. When it goes belly up, it goes belly up hard. And because all these systems are interdependent on each other, when the bigger market crashes, everything kind of falls apart. And the NFTs are part of that, right? I still maintain that had the engineering behind NFTs from the start been able to just use good old-fashioned regular money, the market probably would have been okay, right? The idea of buying digital assets is not new, right? If you've been playing, say, World of Warcraft, you've been able to buy a digital asset like an in-game character or a hat or something like that for real money, and you get to wear the hat on your character as you wander around, beating up dragons. That's not any different than what an NFT is, right? It's a digital thing that you can buy with, in this case, a convoluted purchase process. Instead of saying, "Hey, put $10 in here and you get a digital hat," right? And I think the market would have been okay if it had done that instead of the crazy infrastructure that it has. So you're right that this was a year of rapid collapse in the Web3 market, and it's unclear whether that market will recover to the heights that it was. I think the underlying technologies are still reasonably sound. Ethereum had its big switch this year to from proof of work to proof of stake, which is a huge energy saver. But I think now we go into crypto winter. It's kind of like you have that initial burst of enthusiasm. You have a long dip, a long trough, and then once people figure out how to actually make the thing practical and useful, and all the snake oil salesmen have moved on to the next thing, then you're like, oh, this will be the thing. It's like kind of like podcasting. Podcasting was huge in 2006, went quiet for 10 years, and then finally people are like, oh, I can actually use this thing. And we now see podcasting being a sustainable technology.
You brought up another, not flash in the pan, but something that everybody was talking about and then stopped, which is Web3. Again, still exists, still around, people still trying to figure out how to use it, but the amount of conversation about these things has just died down as the shine wears off. And I'm personally interested to see what the next few things are. What I always find interesting is whatever seems to be trending at that time people will change their whole persona around it. They will change their, social media handles, their bios, the, topics of conversation all around that one thing so that they can be in on the conversation. And then the second that thing is no longer cool or trendy, oh, that wasn't me, And I think this sort of brings up the portion of our conversation around sort of where do you want, and I mean the general you, but also you, Chris, where do you want to be in the adoption of that technology on the bell curve? Do you want to be an early adopter? Do you want to be somewhere in the middle, or do you want to be a laggard? Because when you think about technological innovation, you have to fall into one of those categories. If you're a laggard, usually like me, I admittedly tend to fall into that category. It's okay, this thing has been around for a while. People have already kicked the tires and tested it. Now I know what to do with it. I fall into that category. I would say, Chris, you tend to fall into the early adopter category, provided you're not sinking thousands of dollars into a thing to test it out.
Yes, although I do have 150,000 narrative tokens. If anyone would like them, they're worth $0.
Welp.
Exactly. Thankfully, I didn't spend any actual money on them. I like to test things early to see what's possible, right? Like when somebody buys you a new kitchen appliance, you're like, oh, cool. I'm going to try to see if I can use this thing, right? What does it do? How does it work? What are the possibilities? And to me, that's the exciting part of a lot of these technologies, to see what the technology can do. And then the important part for a lot of us, and this is something I rely on you very heavily for, is the so what. Okay, okay, this thing works, and you can see what's theoretically possible. So what? How does this play into what people are willing to pay money for? Mm-hmm. I was doing some experiments over the weekend, and I'm very pleased with how they're turning out. So my next step is to build some code to integrate an API into some of our tooling. Is specifically OpenAI's GPT language model into some of our tools, because I was doing some testing to see. One of the things that Trust Insights does is we do predictive forecasting of search stuff. We'll say, like, here's a content calendar, right, for your next 3 months. Week by week, these are the 5 topics that are going to trend in search. And one of the challenges we've seen, including ourselves, to be perfectly honest, is we don't always use it, right? We don't always use it really well. But what I was playing with over the weekend was, okay, can I take these 5 topics, feed them in as a prompt to GPT-3 and say, give me 5 blog titles and 5 blog summaries based on these, or give me 10, or give me however many. Taking the data one step further, one step closer to action, so that instead of saying, here's the 5 keywords you need to focus on, if I could hand that to a content manager saying, these are the 10 blog posts you need to write this weekend. Here are the titles. Start writing. Or here's a synopsis, right? Here's your basic outline. Start writing that. And then the logical next step after that is to say, okay, well, if you want to pay a lot of money to us, we will have the machines do it for you. And then you just get first drafts back of the thing. But that, when we talk about early adoption technology, the early adoption was, does this model even work, right? Does it produce something other than word salad? And now that every marketing influencer and their cousin is talking about, the Chat GPT interface and fun things you can do with it, like they're now just getting to the party trick phase, and we're just where I want to be, which is let's make this something useful. And Clay Shirky said something years ago, which has always stuck with me. A tool becomes societally interesting once it becomes technologically boring, right? And for us, for me in particular, the large language models are now boring, right? Yes, it's cool, the things they can do, but it's like, okay, I'm not wowed by it anymore. I understand what it can and can't do. So now let's make it societally interesting, because societally interesting is when people will pay you money for it.
Well, it's funny. Even if I myself am not using the thing that everybody's talking about, I still do my best to pay attention to the conversation just to see what people are saying that even exists. And where you rely on me to figure out the so what, I rely on you to know what's coming. I've been hearing you talk about GPT for a very long time. And by that, I mean in technology years, like at least 18 months, probably longer. I've been hearing you talk about natural language processing for as long as I've known you, which is coming up on 8 years. And so to me, when I see this, I'm not, and I think maybe this is why I feel comfortable being a laggard, is because to me, it's not new. It's not shiny. I've been hearing about it for a while from you, the early adopter. And so now I'm truly in the so what phase. Like, great, you can make a bunch of fun, medieval images out of your portrait as you're giving away all of your personally identifying information. That's not a service that I think Trust Insights needs to offer. So I'm not going to spend too much time worrying about it. And so, I do find it fascinating when I see these things trending and coming up. And then I look at my immediate trusted circle. I'm like, you've been talking about this for years. This isn't new. And so I do like that. That's what I find really interesting. And I appreciate your willingness to be an early adopter in that, because it's, I know for you, it's so much as sort of just fun, pure joy, entertaining. Just like, what can the thing do? I like to push the buttons. I like to poke the holes. I like to break it and rebuild it. And then you hand it to me and go, I broke this. Fix it. Get some duct tape.
But that's an interesting strategic concept if you think about it, right? If you have a mix of folks in your leadership team,
Mm-hmm.
and the early adopters way out in front,
Mm-hmm.
by the time the laggards catch up, compared to the rest of the market, the laggard in that company is still ahead of the mainstream laggard. So you have that arbitrage of time that I think for anything, as we're talking years in review or forecasts and trends, if you have that advantage, you have that time arbitrage, that is a strategic asset that you can use as a company. Because if your next competitor, if their early adopter is your laggard, they've got a while to catch up. They've got, you've got some room to runway.
And I like the way that you're positioning that, because it was funny as you were talking about OpenAI and drafting the blogs and the summaries. That's something that we've been doing on our own website, but also, going back to the conversation about growth moving into next year, that's exactly the process that we'll be doing with our content writers. Is here's the predictive forecast, here's the keyword, here's the topic and the summary. Go write the thing, and it's going to ideally save a lot of time in terms of the writer's output. And I'm excited for that process to start, because I feel like the amount of good content that we can put out, you and I just physically don't have the time to do it. And so having other people who can write the way we want it to be written on our behalf is going to be huge. You still need that human eye toward what's good quality content. So as we're starting to think about sort of, what's trending up, what's trending down, Chris, what is something that, because I see this question all the time, sort of the what's old is new again. And what do you think is something that is old, put in big fat quotation marks, what is old that people are going to think is new again moving into next year?
You will see, I think, a backlash against a lot of the generative AI capabilities. Ruth Carter and I were joking about this on the live stream we did this year. The idea of like organic grass-fed content, right? That human certified content, stuff that you can say is an advantage because it's purely generated by humans. It has human judgment and things. So in the same way that you saw artisanal stuff crop up as a reaction to mainstream manufactured things, and farm to table as a reaction to industrialized agriculture, I think you will see some of that same cycle with the generative AI, particularly once people get after the party trick phase. they will start to realize what the limitations of the models are. They will start to
Mhm.
realize, oh, there's some things it's really not good at. The more specific you are, the less well the models perform without fine tuning. I was talking to my martial arts teacher about this weekend. I was showing him an example of how OpenAI can clean up a lot of text,
Mhm.
which is it's really good at. But there are some things, if it has no domain knowledge about it all, it doesn't know what to do. I fed it the text description of a particular Japanese martial arts kata from this 14th century, and it produced word salad again because it's like, what does this even mean?
Right.
Um, it's just not good at. We were playing with some very arcane concepts from an offshoot esoteric branch of Buddhism, and again, the machine's like, it can tell you the advantages of meditation in very generic terms, but it can't tell you about the specific thing from this
Mhm.
tradition that has these things. It's like, I have no idea what this is. So as people start to become more comfortable with technology, they'll start to realize its limitations, and the thing that leaders, the early adopters, have to contend with then is to say, okay, well, how do we get to the so what phase faster so that
Mhm.
we can get out of that trough and onto that plane of productivity? And that's going to be the big thing in the next couple of years, is companies that figure that out fast are going
Mhm.
to get across that trough and have no shortage of customers and revenue.
That's right. I agree with that. Um, I've been saying this to anyone who asks me this question. The thing that's old that will be new and shiny again, in my opinion, is voice of customer programs. Between data privacy and the implosion of, public community-based social media channels, companies that do not have good mechanisms for gathering feedback from their audience, prospects, customers, former customers are going to struggle. And companies that already have those mechanisms in place will be great. They'll be doing fine. They're going to, leapfrog ahead of their competitors because so many companies rely on social listening. Now, I'm not knocking social listening. I think that there's value to it. I think that companies that are relying on primary, one of the big three, big four social media channels to do their social listening will struggle. So if you're relying on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, you're going to struggle with your voice of customer feedback. If you're not currently talking to your customers on a regular basis, even if it's just a simple, hey, how did we do? Hey, can you take 30 seconds to take this survey? I feel strongly that you're going to struggle because people want to be heard. And if you're not giving them the space to tell you what they think you're doing right or wrong, you're not going to keep them as customers. Sure, nobody wants to sit and wade through all the negative feedback, but it's part of the process. It's the only way that you can improve. And if you are actively ignoring, negative feedback from your customers and just not giving them a way to reach out to you, it's going to be a problem. So I feel like voice of customer programs, oh, I had this great new idea. Let's talk to our customers. That's going to be something that is trending in some way, shape, or form in 2023. What people call it, they're probably going to, do the marketing thing and come up with, goofy acronym names for it. But at the end of the day, I think talking to your customers, talking to actual humans, not relying on chatbots and machines and social media to do the work for you is going to be a big deal. And some companies will struggle to figure it out.
I think that you've stumbled onto something there that is going to radically change the customer experience
Mhm.
for the first companies that figure it out. So I'm going to double down on what you said and say, if you are not doing focus groups and one-on-one detailed interviews, you are
Mhm.
doomed. You are
I,
doomed. I'm going to say
I
that
agree.
right now. Here's why. If you understand these large language models and the fine tuning process and how you create prompts and responses to train models, and you have a large database of customer interactions where that are structured, properly done market research, you can train one of these large language models to be a synthetic customer, right? If you have dozens of interviews, long interviews, 30 minutes, an hour of talking to real customers, you can create essentially a synthetic customer chatbot that you can then ask questions to
Mm-hmm.
and get trained, tuned answers out of, right? Can you imagine, taking 3 headlines that you're thinking about for a customer email and asking a synthetic machine, hey, which one do you like best? And based on the data that you have trained and tuned a large language model on, it can give you a probabilistic, valid answer.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that if you don't have the voice of the customer data. So, Katie, I think voice of the customer is something that people should double or triple down on, because you will need that raw data to make the to build the synthetic customer.
I completely agree with that. And it sort of goes to that larger conversation around machine learning and artificial intelligence that we always have. Is it starts with humans. The machine does not just, magically create the data. The data has to come from what we give them. And so if you're looking to introduce this into your organization in 2023, or even enhance what you already have, go back to your foundation, which is the people, which is your process, and make sure that those things are solid, that your foundation is unshakable for when the earthquake of, I mean, gosh, I don't even want to venture a guess of what the heck is going to happen next. Um, Mostly because I hate putting things out there in the ether and sort of having karma come back on me. But, if we take the very, realistic example of this chat GPT, whatever's going on with artificial intelligence right now, yeah, it's fun to play with. But Chris, to your point, so what? What are companies going to do with it? You have to
Exactly.
give it data to work with. And right now, people are just giving uh, their headshots, which isn't a whole lot.
It's unstructured right now, but the
Yeah.
idea of the synthetic customer, I think, is one that I've not heard anyone talk about at all. So you're hearing it first on the Trust Insights podcast. We should probably put up a landing page about this. But but I think there, particularly since we know data privacy is going to be an issue, if you are taking
Mhm.
trained responses, this is the question, this is the answer. You will be able to create a synthetic customer that you can ask all these questions to, not violate anyone's privacy, and
Mhm.
get real intelligent answers from. Even something as simple as, Katie, what you do every day in the analytics for marketers community, asking a question of the day. Guess what? That goes into model. Here's the question. Here's the responses. Here's the question.
Mhm.
Here's the responses. That can train a large language model to be tuned to and to create that synthetic customer. So I think as a project for 2023, I think it will be one of the many things to look forward to. I know I'm certainly looking forward to a couple weeks of downtime, and
Mhm.
I have on my docket, version 3 is out of date, really badly out of date. So I think it's time to spend the next couple of weeks dusting this off, and probably end up rewriting it from the ground up again, because the field has changed so much.
Mhm. What as we wrap up 2022 for Trust Insights, what is one of your goals for the company for next year?
For next year, the big thing is, and I've got on my docket to we need to get done by the end of January, is to get everyone onto Google Analytics 4, like all reporting, every application, and basically to tell everyone this is the way we're doing it now, because in a few months you don't have a choice. And wouldn't you rather be ahead of the pack, ahead of the competitors, who are going to lag and then wonder why they can't get any information out of their systems? So that's one of those very basic things. And
Mhm.
the second thing is, it's been a while since we've built something net new, like something that is not just a tweak of an existing thing. And so one of my personal goals for next year is to build something that is net new, that has not been seen before, that is really unique, and that will deliver value to the market.
Very cool. I look forward to seeing whatever the heck that is.
Me too.
Um,
How about you?
for the company, I feel like we're on the cusp of really nailing down our messaging, our offerings, and really, clarifying what the heck it is we do. Like, we know what we do, our customers know what we do, but the outside world still struggles to understand what we do. So I feel like that will be something that is clarified. And then for me, which, leads to growth and all those other, great goals that, we who own companies like to have. For me personally, um, and I'm looking at my whiteboard right now, I feel like one of my personal goals is to launch the 5P workshop. And, I have all the pieces. I just need to get over my self-doubt and just put it together and put it out there and test it. Um, but I do feel like if I can do it well, it can be a powerful tool for strategic planning, for organizational behavior, for introducing artificial intelligence, all the things that involve humans, which is literally everything.
It's true. It's true.
Hmm.
So let's hope that 2023 has fewer global consequence curveballs to throw our way.
See, this is why I don't like to put that out there, because you're anyway, go ahead.
And in the meantime, we wish you and yours a safe and happy, healthy holiday season, however it is you choose to observe it. And we will talk to you in January of 2023. So stay safe, everyone. And oh yeah, I forgot to remind folks, if you are bored on the if you're bored on the holidays, we won't be there the whole time. But if you want to pop by and say hello and stuff, or you have last minute questions before year end, stop on over to the free Slack group, trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 3,000 other marketers are probably drinking too much eggnog. And wherever it is you watch or listen to this show, if there's a channel you'd rather have it on instead, go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, and you can find us on most other platforms. And while you're there and you're inebriated on eggnog, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. It helps share the show. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next year.